Hello there, and welcome to Sleep Orion. Maybe you've had a long day, perhaps your mind is full of noise and thoughts that won't settle, or maybe you simply find comfort in learning about the remarkable things humanity has achieved. Either way, tonight's journey will take you far beyond the edges of our solar system, riding alongside two spacecraft that carry perhaps the most ambitious message ever sent into the cosmos. You don't need to do anything now but rest. Let your body sink into comfort, allow your breathing to slow and deepen, and notice how the weight of the day begins to lift. Tonight we drift into the story of the Voyager Golden Record, a 12-inch disc of gold-plated copper that travels through the darkness of space, carrying sounds, images, and greetings from Earth. It holds music and laughter, the songs of whales and the voices of children, photographs of our world and diagrams explaining who we are. The record was created in 1977, assembled by a small team in just 6 weeks, and launched aboard two spacecraft that would eventually leave our solar system entirely. This is not simply a story about what is on the record. It is a story about hope, about what we chose to say when given the chance to speak to the universe itself. It is about the people who made difficult decisions in too little time, selecting which pieces of human culture deserve to represent all of us. And it is about two spacecraft that continue traveling, decades later, carrying that message into a darkness so vast and so empty that they may never be found. If you enjoy these gentle journeys through history and exploration, consider liking, subscribing, or sharing a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one curious mind at a time. But for now, if you're ready, let's begin. The Golden Record is traveling through interstellar space right now. At this very moment, while you rest, two identical copies of the record move through a region of space where the Sun is just another star in the distance. Voyager 1, launched in September 1977, is now more than 15 billion miles from Earth. It crossed into interstellar space in August 2012, becoming the first human-made object to leave the protective bubble of our Sun's influence. Voyager 2, launched 2 weeks earlier in August 1977, followed its twin into that same vast darkness in November 2018. Both spacecraft are still transmitting data back to Earth, though their signals are incredibly faint. The power from their plutonium generators slowly declines with each passing year, and engineers estimate that the last instrument will fall silent sometime in the mid to late 2020s. After that, the Voyagers will continue on in silence, coasting through space without power, guided only by the momentum they gained decades ago. The record itself sits mounted on the side of each spacecraft, protected by an aluminum cover. The cover bears instructions, etched in symbolic language, explaining how to play the record and where Earth can be found. Neither spacecraft is aimed at any particular star. They drift outward on trajectories shaped by their encounters with the giant planets. Voyager 1 moves roughly toward the constellation Camelopardalis. In about 40,000 years, it will pass within 1.6 light-years of a star called Gliese for 45. That may sound close, but 1.6 light-years is still nearly 10 trillion miles. Voyager 2 heads in a different direction, toward the constellation Andromeda. In roughly 40,000 years, it will pass within 1.7 light-years of a star called Ross 248. The chances that either spacecraft will ever be found are vanishingly small. Space is unimaginably empty. Even within our own solar system, the distances between objects are so vast that spacecraft must be aimed with extraordinary precision to reach their destinations. Between stars, that emptiness multiplies 1,000-fold. Carl Sagan, who led the team that created the Golden Record, acknowledged this. He knew the record would almost certainly never be played by alien hands. But he also understood that the act of creating it mattered. It was a message from humanity to itself as much as it was a greeting to the cosmos. It said that we are here, that we exist, and that we wanted to be known. The record will outlast everything we have built on Earth. Gold does not corrode. Copper does not decay in the vacuum of space. The protective aluminum cover shields the record from micrometeorite impacts and cosmic radiation. Scientists estimate that the record could remain playable for billions of years, long after our sun has swelled into a red giant and consumed the inner planets. The civilizations, languages, and cultures represented on the record may all be gone by the time anyone finds it. The Earth itself may be unrecognizable. But the record will endure, spinning silently through the dark, carrying its cargo of sounds and images forward through time. This raises a question that the team struggled with throughout the entire creation process. What do you say when you might be speaking to someone millions of years in the future? What do you include when you have no idea who might be listening, or whether they will understand anything you send? The team had no way of knowing if any extraterrestrial civilization would even use visual or auditory senses. They did not know if the concept of music would be meaningful, or if photographs would be intelligible. They had to make choices based on what felt important, what felt true, and what felt worth preserving. The decision to include a record at all came relatively late in the planning process. The Voyager spacecraft were designed primarily to study Jupiter and Saturn, using a rare alignment of the outer planets that occurs only once every 176 years. Engineers had packed the spacecraft with scientific instruments. There was no initial plan for any sort of message to extraterrestrials. That idea emerged because of precedent set by an earlier mission. In 1972 and 1973, NASA launched the Pioneer 10 and 11 spacecraft on trajectories that would also take them beyond the solar system. Those spacecraft carried small metal plaques designed by Carl Sagan and Frank Drake. The plaques showed line drawings of a man and woman, a diagram of the solar system showing which planet the spacecraft came from, and a pulsar map indicating Earth's location in the galaxy. The plaques were simple and elegant, but they were limited by the medium. You could only fit so much information on a piece of metal. When the Voyager mission was being planned, John Cassani, the project manager, thought it would be appropriate to include something similar. He contacted Carl Sagan in early 1977 and asked if he would be interested in putting together another plaque. Sagan thought about it and realized that the Voyager spacecraft had one advantage the Pioneers did not. The Voyagers were much larger, and they had more mass budget to spare. That meant it might be possible to include something more substantial than a plaque. He proposed a phonograph record. Records were a familiar technology in 1977. Most households had record players, and the format was well understood. More importantly, a record could store far more information than a plaque ever could. Audio could be encoded directly. Images could be encoded as well, using a method similar to how television signals worked at the time. A single 12-inch record could hold an hour or more of audio and more than 100 images. It was an ambitious idea, and it required NASA's approval. NASA gave Sagan a budget of $1,500 and 6 weeks to complete the project. That timeline was absurdly short, but the launch date could not be moved. The alignment of the planets would not wait. Sagan would later joke that he and his team spent far more than $1,500 out of their own pockets. The actual cost of producing the records, once you included all the labor, consultation, and production expenses, ran closer to $18,000. But the official budget was what it was, and the team made it work. Sagan assembled a small group of collaborators, each bringing different expertise to the project. Andrew Yang was brought on as creative director. She had worked with Sagan before and shared his passion for communicating science and humanity's place in the cosmos. Drew Yang would later become Sagan's third wife, though at the time the record was being made, their romantic relationship had only just begun. That personal connection would later become part of the record story in an unexpectedly intimate way. Frank Drake was a key member of the team. Drake is well known for his work in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and for creating the Drake equation, a formula for estimating how many communicative civilizations might exist in our galaxy. His experience thinking about how to communicate across vast distances made him invaluable. Timothy Ferris served as the producer. He handled much of the technical side of assembling and recording the audio content. Ferris had a background in music journalism, and his knowledge of recording technology helped the team navigate the technical constraints of fitting everything onto a single disc. John Lomberg was the team's artist and visual consultant. He helped select the images that would be encoded on the record and designed some of the diagrams that appear on the cover. Lomberg had a talent for distilling complex scientific concepts into clear visual forms, a skill that proved essential. Jimmy Iovine, who would later become a famous music producer and entrepreneur, was brought in as the sound engineer. He was still early in his career at the time, but he had already worked with John Lennon. In fact, Lennon recommended Iovine to Sagan's team when they reached out to see if the Beatles might contribute a song to the record. That effort ultimately failed due to copyright issues, a story we will return to later. Linda Salzman Sagan, Carl Sagan's wife at the time, took on the task of assembling the spoken greetings. She coordinated with language experts, tracked down speakers, and organized the recording sessions. It was painstaking work, and it had to be done quickly. Alan Lomax, an ethnomusicologist famous for his field recordings of folk music from around the world, consulted on the musical selections. Lomax had spent decades traveling and recording traditional music that was disappearing as cultures modernized. His expertise helped the team identify pieces that represented genuine cultural diversity, rather than just popular or well-known works. This small team worked frantically throughout the spring and summer of 1977. They debated, researched, recorded, and assembled the contents of what would become one of the most enduring messages humanity has ever created. They knew they would not be able to please everyone. They knew that whatever they chose would be incomplete, insufficient, and subject to criticism. But they also knew they had to try. The opportunity to speak to the universe does not come along very often. The record was always meant to serve two audiences. Carl Sagan said this explicitly. One audience was the hypothetical extraterrestrial intelligence that might, millions or billions of years from now, find the Voyager spacecraft and decode the record. The other audience was humanity itself. The record was a statement about who we were in 1977, what we valued, and what we hoped to preserve. It was a time capsule as much as it was a greeting to the stars. That dual purpose shaped many of the decisions the team made. If the record was only for aliens, they might have approached the selections differently. They might have focused more heavily on scientific and mathematical information, assuming that any spacefaring civilization would understand those languages more easily than cultural expressions like music or art. But because the record was also for us, for the people of Earth, the team wanted it to reflect the richness and diversity of human culture. They wanted it to show not just what we know, but who we are. President Jimmy Carter wrote a message that was included with the record. It reads, "This is a present from a small, distant world, a token of our sounds, our science, our images, our music, our thoughts, and our feelings. We are attempting to survive our time so we may live into yours." There is something both humble and hopeful in those words. The phrase "attempting to survive our time" acknowledges the fragility of human civilization, the real possibility that we might not endure. But the rest of the message looks outward with optimism, assuming that someone, somewhere, might find this small token and know that we existed. The United Nations Secretary-General at the time, Kurt Waldheim, also recorded a greeting. His message, spoken in English, was included along with greetings in 55 other languages. Waldheim's involvement gave the record an official, international character. This was not just a message from the United States, even though NASA was an American agency. It was an attempt to speak on behalf of all humanity. There is something almost childlike in the earnestness of the whole project. The idea that a phonograph record could somehow communicate the essence of humanity to beings we cannot imagine, across distances we cannot truly comprehend, using technology that was already becoming obsolete even as the record was being made. The compact disc would be introduced just 5 years later, and the phonograph would soon begin its long decline into obsolescence. By the time the Voyagers pass close to another star, phonographs may be as ancient and mysterious to humans as the record itself would be to any finder. And yet, the team pressed on. They had to make decisions quickly, and many of those decisions were difficult. How do you represent the full diversity of human music in 90 minutes? How do you select 116 images to stand in for an entire planet's worth of landscapes, cultures, and experiences? Every inclusion meant countless exclusions. Every choice carried weight. The story of those choices, the debates and compromises and lucky breaks, forms the heart of what the Golden Record really is. It is not just a collection of sounds and images. It is a document of a particular moment in time, created by a small group of people working under intense pressure, trying to answer an impossible question. What do we say when we finally have the chance to introduce ourselves to the universe? And just as importantly, what do we say to ourselves about who we want to be? Let's begin with the people who made it happen, the small team who worked frantically through the summer of 1977 to assemble this message in a bottle, cast into the cosmic ocean. Carl Sagan was, in many ways, the perfect person to lead this project. He was a brilliant scientist, a gifted communicator, and someone who thought deeply about humanity's place in the cosmos. He had already worked on the Pioneer plaques, so he understood both the technical challenges and the philosophical weight of creating a message for potential extraterrestrials. But Sagan was also someone who believed deeply in the power of science and knowledge to inspire and unite people. He saw the Golden Record not just as a scientific project, but as an act of optimism and imagination. Sagan had become well known to the public through his work popularizing science. His television series Cosmos, which would air a few years after Voyager's launch, would reach hundreds of millions of people around the world. He had a gift for explaining complex scientific ideas in ways that were accessible and emotionally resonant. He understood that facts alone do not move people. You need story, context, and connection. That sensibility shaped how the team approached the Golden Record. They were not just compiling data. They were telling a story about Earth and its inhabitants. And Drew Yang brought a different but complementary perspective. Where Sagan was a scientist first, Drew Yang came from a background in literature and the arts. She had a poet's sensitivity to language and meaning, and she pushed the team to think carefully about the emotional and cultural dimensions of what they were including. Drew Yang was deeply involved in selecting the music and images, and she fought hard for choices that she felt truly represented humanity's creativity and spirit. Drew Yang and Sagan fell in love during the creation of the record, and that romance became part of the record itself in a way that no one outside the team knew about for many years. We will explore that story later, but it is worth noting here because it speaks to how personally invested the team was in this project. They were not just doing a job. They were pouring themselves into an act of creation that they knew would outlast them by billions of years. Frank Drake was the scientific anchor of the group. He had spent years thinking about the problem of interstellar communication through his work on SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Drake understood that any message sent across the stars would face enormous challenges. There is no common language, no shared frame of reference, and no way to know if the recipient will even perceive the world in ways similar to how we do. Drake helped the team think through these problems, always grounding their more imaginative ideas in practical constraints. The team faced an immediate and pressing challenge. They had 6 weeks to complete the entire project. That meant they had to make decisions quickly, sometimes without as much deliberation as they would have liked. They could not spend months debating the merits of one musical piece over another. They could not conduct extensive research into every culture and language to ensure perfect representation. They had to work with the resources and knowledge they had immediately available. This time pressure shaped the final product in significant ways. Many of the musical selections came from personal collections or were suggested by people the team knew. Many of the speakers for the greetings were found through personal networks at Cornell University, where Sagan worked, or through contacts in the local community. If the team had more time, they might have sought out a more systematic and comprehensive approach. But the clock was ticking, and the launch date was immovable. One of the early debates centered on whether to include any images at all. Encoding images onto a record was technically possible, but it was complex and time-consuming. The team had to develop a method that would allow the images to be decoded by someone who had no knowledge of human technology. They decided to encode the images as a series of vertical lines, similar to how analog television worked. The cover of the record would include instructions showing how to reconstruct the images from those lines. John Lomberg played a crucial role in designing those instructions. He created diagrams showing the playback speed of the record, the structure of the image encoding, and even a sample image so that anyone decoding the record could verify they were doing it correctly. All of these instructions were rendered in symbolic language, using binary numbers and universal constants like the wavelength of hydrogen, which any scientifically advanced civilization would presumably understand. The team also included a pulsar map on the cover, identical to the one used on the Pioneer plaques. Pulsars are rotating neutron stars that emit beams of radiation at extremely regular intervals. Each pulsar has a unique rotation period, like a cosmic fingerprint. By showing the relative positions and periods of several pulsars as seen from Earth, the map provides a way for any finder to determine where and when the record was made. The pulsar periods will change over time as the stars age, so by measuring those periods and comparing them to the map, a finder could calculate how long ago the record was created. The uranium-238 sample included on the cover serves a similar purpose. Uranium-238 decays into other elements at a known rate, with a half-life of about 4.47 billion years. By measuring how much of the uranium has decayed, a sufficiently advanced civilization could determine the age of the record. It is a radioactive clock, silently counting down the eons as the spacecraft drifts through space. All of these technical elements were designed with one principle in mind. The record had to be self-explanatory. There would be no follow-up mission to provide clarification, no second chance if the instructions were unclear. Everything had to be included on the record itself and its cover. That constraint forced the team to think carefully about how to communicate complex ideas using only symbols and diagrams. But the technical challenges were, in some ways, the easier part of the project. Much more difficult were the cultural and ethical questions about what to include. The team had to represent all of humanity using a tiny sample of sounds and images. Every choice they made would privilege some cultures and overlook others. There was no way to avoid that, but they tried to be as thoughtful and inclusive as possible given the constraints they faced. One of the most difficult decisions involved the images of human beings. After NASA received criticism for the nudity on the Pioneer plaques, which showed line drawings of a naked man and woman, the agency was hesitant to include similar images on the Golden Record. The criticism had come primarily from conservative groups in the United States who felt the drawings were inappropriate. NASA, ever mindful of public opinion and congressional funding, wanted to avoid another controversy. Sagan and his team argued that any realistic portrayal of humans required showing what we actually look like. Clothing is a cultural artifact that changes with time and place. To show humans only in clothing would be to show a very narrow and specific version of humanity. But NASA was firm. The team compromised by including a silhouette of a nude couple instead of a full photograph. However, they also managed to sneak in images of anatomically correct nude figures in one of John Lomberg's diagrams showing vertebrate evolution. In that context, the nudity was scientific rather than representational, and NASA let it pass. This tension between what the team wanted to include and what NASA would permit was a recurring theme. The record was a NASA project, funded by taxpayer dollars and subject to political oversight. That meant certain boundaries could not be crossed, even if the team felt those boundaries were arbitrary or counterproductive. They had to navigate those constraints while still trying to create something meaningful. The team wanted the record to be honest. They wanted it to reflect both the best and the worst of humanity. But NASA had its own concerns. The agency wanted the record to present Earth and its inhabitants in a positive light. Including images of war, poverty, disease, or human suffering might be interpreted as a sign that humanity was violent or self-destructive. Better, NASA felt, to focus on achievements and beauty. Sagan and his team debated this point extensively. They felt that excluding the darker aspects of human existence would make the record dishonest, a sanitized portrait that did not truly represent who we are. But they also understood NASA's position. The record was a gift, an offering of friendship. You do not introduce yourself to a stranger by immediately listing your flaws and failures. You lead with your strengths and hope for understanding. In the end, the team included very few images that could be considered negative. There are no images of war, poverty, or violence. The closest the record comes to acknowledging conflict is an image of the Great Wall of China, which was built as a defensive fortification, and some of the musical selections that touch on themes of longing, loss, or struggle. But overall, the record presents an idealized vision of Earth and humanity. Whether that was the right choice is still debated. The time constraint meant that some opportunities were missed. The team wanted to include a greeting in Swahili, which is spoken by tens of millions of people across East Africa. But the person they had arranged to record the greeting did not show up, and they could not find a replacement in time. So Swahili is not represented. That omission stands out because Swahili is one of the most widely spoken languages in Africa, and its absence highlights the gaps created by working under such a tight deadline. Similarly, the musical selections reflect a certain bias toward what was accessible to the team in 1977. Many of the recordings came from collections held by Alan Lomax or were already available in academic libraries. If a particular culture's music had not been extensively recorded and documented by ethnomusicologists, it was less likely to be considered for inclusion simply because the team did not have time to seek it out. This does not mean the team was intentionally exclusionary. It means they were working within the limits of what was feasible given the time and resources available. The team was aware of these limitations, and they openly acknowledged them in the book Murmurs of Earth, which Sagan and his collaborators published in 1978. The book includes essays from each team member reflecting on the process and the choices they made. They do not claim the record is perfect or comprehensive. They describe it as the best they could do under the circumstances, a flawed but earnest attempt to capture something essential about humanity. There is a certain poignancy in that admission. The Golden Record is often described in grand, almost mythic terms. It is the message we sent to the stars, the voice of humanity speaking into the void. But the reality is much more human and much more humble. It is the work of a handful of people, working against the clock, doing their best with imperfect information and limited resources. It is flawed because it was made by flawed beings. And yet, precisely because of that, it feels more honest, more real, than a polished and perfected message ever could. The team finished the work just in time. The records were manufactured, tested, packaged, and delivered to the spacecraft with only days to spare. Voyager 2 launched on August 20, 1977. Voyager 1, despite its name, launched second, on September 5, 1977. The staggered launch dates and different trajectories meant that Voyager 1 would reach Jupiter and Saturn before its twin, even though it left Earth later. As the spacecraft lifted off, carrying their golden cargo into the sky, the team felt a mixture of exhaustion, satisfaction, and perhaps a little bit of melancholy. They had created something extraordinary, but they would never know if it would be found, if it would be understood, or if it would matter to anyone beyond the people of Earth who knew about it. The record was now beyond their control, beyond anyone's control, hurtling through space on a journey that would outlast civilizations. In the years since, the Golden Record has taken on a life of its own in popular culture. It has been referenced in films, television shows, books, and music. It has become a symbol of human curiosity, optimism, and the desire to connect with something larger than ourselves. People who have never seen the spacecraft or heard the contents of the record still know about it, still find meaning in the idea that we sent a message to the stars. But the record's greatest impact may not be on any hypothetical extraterrestrial who finds it. It may be on us, the people who created it, and the generations who have learned about it since. The record holds a mirror up to humanity, asking us to reflect on who we are and what we want to say about ourselves. It asks what we value, what we want to preserve, and what we hope for. Those are questions worth asking, whether or not anyone in the cosmos is listening. Now, let's turn our attention to what is actually on the record. Let's explore the music that was chosen to represent the sounds of Earth, the careful and sometimes contentious process of selecting 90 minutes of audio to stand in for thousands of years of human musical tradition. The musical selection process was one of the most challenging aspects of creating the Golden Record. Music is deeply tied to culture, history, and personal taste. What sounds beautiful to one person might sound strange or unpleasant to another. And the team had to consider not just human ears, but the possibility that an extraterrestrial listener might have no concept of music at all. They had to choose pieces that were both representative of Earth's musical diversity and, ideally, interesting or beautiful even to a listener with no cultural context. The team settled on 27 musical pieces, drawn from cultures and time periods spanning thousands of years and nearly every inhabited continent. The selections include Western classical music, traditional folk music, sacred music, popular music, and pieces that defy easy categorization. The total runtime of the music is about 90 minutes, a significant portion of the record's limited capacity. The decision to include so much music was deliberate. The team felt that music was one of humanity's most universal forms of expression. Nearly every culture on Earth has some tradition of music making, even if the forms and functions of that music vary widely. Music can convey emotion, tell stories, mark important events, and bring people together. It felt essential to include a substantial amount of music if the record was going to truly represent humanity. The first piece on the record is Johann Sebastian Bach's Brandenburg Concerto No. 2 in F major, first movement, performed by the Munich Bach Orchestra conducted by Karl Richter. Bach appears 3 times on the record, more than any other composer. This is partly because Bach's music is mathematically complex and structurally intricate, qualities the team felt might appeal to a scientifically advanced civilization. But it is also because the team simply loved Bach's music and felt it represented some of the highest achievements of human artistic expression. There is a famous story, possibly apocryphal, that during the selection process, someone on the team joked that including so much Bach might seem like showing off. But the final selection stood. Bach's music made the cut not just for its complexity, but for its emotional depth and its timeless quality. The Brandenburg Concerto is joyful and energetic, full of interweaving melodic lines that dance around each other with precision and grace. The second piece is a recording of Javanese gamelan music, specifically a piece called Ketawang, Puspawarna, which translates to kinds of flowers. Gamelan is a traditional Indonesian musical form featuring percussion instruments, primarily metallophones, gongs, and drums. The sound is shimmering, layered, and quite different from Western musical traditions. The team included it to represent Southeast Asian musical culture and to show the diversity of musical aesthetics that exist on Earth. The gamelan piece is followed by percussion music from Senegal, performed by the Mahi musicians of Benin. This is a short, rhythmically complex piece that showcases the rich tradition of West African drumming. Rhythm is a fundamental element of music, arguably more universal than melody or harmony, and the team wanted to include examples of music where rhythm takes center stage. The fourth piece is an initiation song performed by Pygmy girls from the Ituri rainforest in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This recording, made by ethnomusicologist Colin Turnbull, is less than a minute long, but it represents one of the world's oldest continuous musical traditions. The Mbuti people have lived in the rainforest for thousands of years, and their music reflects a deep connection to their environment. The song features layered vocal parts that weave in and out of each other, creating a texture that is both intricate and deeply communal. Next is a recording of Aboriginal songs from Australia. The piece includes two songs, Morning Star and Devil Bird, recorded by Sandra Lebrun Holmes. Aboriginal Australians have the oldest continuous culture on Earth, stretching back more than 50,000 years. Their music often serves ceremonial and storytelling functions, preserving knowledge and history through song. The inclusion of this piece acknowledges the depth of history and the importance of indigenous cultures. The record then shifts to El Cascabel, a Mexican mariachi song performed by Lorenzo Barcelata and Mariachi Mexico. This is a lively, festive piece that represents the musical traditions of Latin America. Mariachi music is characterized by its use of stringed instruments, trumpets, and vocal harmonies. It is celebratory and communal, often performed at weddings, parties, and festivals. The team wanted to include music that conveyed joy and vitality, and El Cascabel fits the description perfectly. And then, controversially, comes Johnny B. Good by Chuck Berry. This was the only piece of rock and roll included on the record, and its selection sparked significant debate. Alan Lomax, the ethnomusicologist, reportedly objected to including rock music at all. He felt it was too adolescent, too rooted in a specific moment in American culture to be truly representative of humanity. Carl Sagan's response was simple and pointed: there are a lot of adolescents on the planet. Johnny B. Good is a propulsive, energetic song built around Chuck Berry's distinctive guitar playing. The lyrics tell the story of a young man from Louisiana who dreams of becoming a musician. It is optimistic, ambitious, and deeply American. But it also represents something larger. Rock and roll was born out of a fusion of African American musical traditions, including blues, gospel, and rhythm and blues, with elements of country and folk music. It is a hybrid form, created in a specific cultural context, but it has spread around the world and influenced countless other musical styles. The inclusion of Johnny B. Good was bold. It acknowledged that popular music, even music that might seem trivial or ephemeral, is a legitimate and important part of human culture. It also showed that the team was not limiting themselves to music that was old, traditional, or canonically important. They were willing to include music from the present moment, music that was still evolving. The next piece is a men's house song from New Guinea, recorded by Robert McLennan. This is another short piece, just over a minute long, representing the musical traditions of the Pacific Islands. The song features a group of male voices singing in close harmony, with a rhythmic intensity that builds and releases throughout the piece. Following that is a recording of Japanese shakuhachi music. The piece, called Sakaku Reibo, or depicting the cranes in their nest, is performed by Goro Yamaguchi on the shakuhachi, a bamboo flute that has been used in Japanese music for centuries. The sound is breathy and meditative, with long, sustained notes and subtle variations in pitch and tone. Shakuhachi music is often associated with Zen Buddhism, and it has a contemplative, introspective quality that contrasts sharply with some of the other, more rhythmically driven pieces on the record. The record returns to Bach with the Gavotte en Rondo from the Partita No. 3 in E major for violin, performed by Arthur Grumiaux. This is a solo violin piece, elegant and technically demanding. The gavotte is a dance form, and there is a lightness and grace to the music that makes it feel almost weightless. Grumiaux's performance is crystal clear, every note perfectly articulated. Next is an excerpt from Mozart's The Magic Flute, specifically the Queen of the Night aria, performed by soprano Edda Moser with the Bavarian State Opera Orchestra conducted by Wolfgang Sawallisch. This is one of the most famous arias in all of opera, known for its incredibly high notes and virtuosic vocal acrobatics. The Queen of the Night is a character driven by rage and vengeance, and the music reflects that emotional intensity. The aria is thrilling, almost overwhelming in its technical brilliance. The inclusion of opera was important to the team. Opera combines music, drama, and storytelling in a way that is unique to human culture. It is a total art form, and the Queen of the Night aria is one of its most iconic moments. Whether an extraterrestrial listener would appreciate it is anyone's guess, but the team felt it deserved a place on the record. The next piece is Chakrulo, a Georgian choral song performed by the Georgian State Merited Ensemble of Folk Song and Dance. This is a powerful, harmonically rich piece featuring multiple male voices singing in a traditional polyphonic style. Georgian polyphony is one of the oldest choral traditions in the world, and it is characterized by complex harmonies and a driving, rhythmic energy. The song is about a warrior going into battle, and there is a fierce, defiant quality to the music. The record then shifts to Peru with a recording of roncadoras, which are panpipes, along with drums. This is a brief piece, less than a minute long, but it represents the indigenous musical traditions of the Andes. Panpipes have been used in South America for thousands of years, and their sound is bright and penetrating, cutting through the thin mountain air. The next selection is Melancholy Blues, performed by Louis Armstrong and his Hot Seven. This is a jazz recording from 1927, and it features Armstrong's unmistakable trumpet playing and gravelly voice. Jazz is one of America's most significant contributions to world music, born out of the African American experience in the early 20th century. It is improvisational, expressive, and deeply rooted in the blues tradition. Armstrong was one of jazz's greatest innovators, and his playing on this recording is both technically brilliant and emotionally resonant. Following that is a piece of Azerbaijani bagpipe music, recorded by Radio Moscow. The bagpipes are associated with Scotland in popular imagination, but they are actually found in many cultures around the world. The Azerbaijani bagpipes have a nasal, reedy sound, and the music has a mournful, almost hypnotic quality. The record then includes an excerpt from Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, specifically the Sacrificial Dance from Part 2, performed by the Columbia Symphony Orchestra conducted by Stravinsky himself. The Rite of Spring is one of the most revolutionary pieces of classical music ever written. When it premiered in Paris in 1913, it caused a riot. The music is harsh, dissonant, and rhythmically complex, a far cry from the more melodic and harmonious pieces elsewhere on the record. The team included it because it represents a radical break with musical tradition, a willingness to experiment and push boundaries. It shows that human music is not static but constantly evolving. The record returns to Bach one final time with the Prelude and Fugue No. 1 in C major from the Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 2, performed by Glenn Gould. This is a piano piece, serene and mathematically structured. The Well-Tempered Clavier is a collection of preludes and fugues in all 24 major and minor keys, a monumental work that demonstrates Bach's mastery of counterpoint and harmonic structure. Glenn Gould's performance is precise and meditative, bringing out the inner logic of the music. Next is the first movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, performed by the Philharmonia Orchestra conducted by Otto Klemperer. This is perhaps the most famous piece of classical music ever written. The opening four-note motif, often described as fate knocking at the door, is recognized around the world. The symphony is dramatic, powerful, and emotionally intense. It builds relentlessly from that opening motif, developing and transforming it through the course of the movement. The team included it because it represents the Western symphonic tradition at its height, and because it is music that many people on Earth would instantly recognize. The record then shifts to Bulgaria with a recording of Izlul Je Delio Hagdutin, sung by Valia Balkanska. This is a traditional Bulgarian folk song, sung in a distinctive vocal style characterized by ornamentation and open, resonant vowels. The song is haunting and beautiful, and it represents the rich folk traditions of Eastern Europe. Balkanska's voice is clear and powerful, carrying the melody with a sense of longing and melancholy. Next is a recording of a Navajo night chant, performed by Ambrose Roan Horse, Chester Roan, and Tom Roan. This is a sacred song, part of a healing ceremony that can last 9 days. The Navajo are indigenous people of the southwestern United States, and their musical traditions are deeply tied to their spiritual beliefs and practices. The night chant is rhythmic and repetitive, designed to create a meditative state and invoke the presence of the holy people. Including this piece acknowledges the importance of indigenous cultures in North America and the sacred dimension of music. The record then includes the Fairy Round by Anthony Holborn, performed by the Early Music Consort of London directed by David Munro. This is a Renaissance dance piece from England, light and playful. It represents the courtly music of Europe in the 16th century, a time of great artistic flowering. The instrumentation includes recorders, lutes, and other period instruments, giving the music an antique, delicate quality. Next is a recording of panpipes from the Solomon Islands, collected by the Solomon Islands Broadcasting Service. This is another brief piece, representing the musical traditions of the Pacific. The panpipes have a soft, breathy tone, and the melody has a simple, almost hypnotic quality. The record then includes a Peruvian wedding song, recorded by John Cohen. This is a vocal piece sung by a young girl from Huancavelica. Her voice is high and clear, unaccompanied by any instruments. The song is joyful and celebratory, marking one of life's most important milestones. It is less than a minute long, but it conveys a sense of community and tradition. Next is Liu Shui, or Flowing Streams, performed on the guqin by Guan Pinghu. The guqin is a traditional Chinese stringed instrument, and it has been played for more than 3,000 years. Liu Shui is one of the most famous pieces in the guqin repertoire. The music is contemplative and flowing, evoking the movement of water over rocks. The guqin has a quiet, resonant tone, and the performance is full of subtle variations in dynamics and timing. This is music meant to be listened to with deep attention, in silence and stillness. The record includes a piece of Indian classical music next, a raga called Jat Kahan Ho, sung by Surshri Keza by Kirka. Indian classical music is built around ragas, which are melodic frameworks that establish mood and emotion. Each raga is traditionally associated with a particular time of day or season. The performance features intricate vocal ornamentation and is accompanied by traditional instruments. Indian classical music has a centuries-old tradition of improvisation and expression, and this piece represents that rich heritage. Then comes Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground, performed by Blind Willie Johnson. This is a gospel blues piece, instrumental except for Johnson's wordless humming and moaning. Johnson plays slide guitar, and the sound is raw, emotional, and deeply moving. The piece was recorded in 1927, and it captures a moment of spiritual longing and suffering. Johnson was a street preacher and musician, and his music reflects the African American experience in the early 20th century. Dark Was the Night is one of the most hauntingly beautiful recordings on the entire record. The final musical selection is the Cavatina from Beethoven's String Quartet No. 13 in B-flat major, Opus 130, performed by the Budapest String Quartet. This is a late Beethoven work, composed when the composer was almost completely deaf. The Cavatina is deeply introspective and emotional, a meditation on beauty, loss, and transcendence. Beethoven himself described it as one of the most moving pieces he ever wrote. It is a fitting conclusion to the musical portion of the record, a piece that speaks to the depths of human emotion and the capacity for art to express what words cannot. These 27 pieces represent an astonishing diversity of musical traditions, aesthetics, and cultural contexts. They span centuries and continents, from the ancient traditions of the guqin to the modern sounds of Chuck Berry's electric guitar. They include sacred music and secular music, music for dancing and music for meditation, music of celebration and music of sorrow. But for all their diversity, the selections also reveal certain biases and limitations. Western classical music is heavily represented, with Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, and Stravinsky all appearing. This reflects the cultural background of the team members, most of whom were trained in Western musical traditions and had deep knowledge of that repertoire. Non-Western music is represented as well, but often in shorter selections and with less explanation or context. There are also notable absences. There is no African music from the continent's interior, no Aboriginal Australian music beyond the one brief selection, no music from the Arab world, no Celtic music, no reggae, no samba. Every musical tradition on Earth could point to something that was left out. The team knew this and acknowledged it. They were not trying to create a comprehensive survey of all human music. That would be impossible even with unlimited time and space. They were trying to create a representative sample, a collection that would convey the richness and diversity of musical expression on Earth. The debates over the musical selections were intense. Each team member had their own favorites and felt certain pieces were essential. Alan Lomax pushed for more traditional folk music. And Drew Yang advocated for pieces that had emotional power and cultural significance. Timothy Ferris brought his knowledge of rock and popular music. They listened to hundreds of recordings, made lists, argued, compromised, and slowly narrowed down the choices. One of the most painful omissions was the Beatles. The team desperately wanted to include Here Comes the Sun, a song written by George Harrison. The Beatles themselves were in favor of the idea. John Lennon, when contacted, endorsed the project and recommended Jimmy Iovine as the sound engineer. But the music rights were controlled by EMI, the record company, and EMI refused to grant permission. They wanted $50,000 per spacecraft, an absurd sum that was more than the entire budget for creating the record. The team could not afford it, and so one of the most culturally significant musical groups of the 20th century is not represented. Years later, Drew Yang reflected on this in an interview. She said it was tragic that corporate greed prevented the Beatles from being included. Here was a chance to send a piece of music into the distant future, to give it a kind of immortality, and the rights holders were worried about money. It was a stark reminder that even the most idealistic projects have to navigate the mundane realities of copyright law and corporate interests. The musical portion of the record is powerful, moving, and deeply human. It shows the incredible range of ways that people have used sound to express themselves, to communicate, to connect with each other and with something larger. Whether any extraterrestrial listener would understand or appreciate it is impossible to say. Music is so deeply tied to the way our brains process sound, to our cultural conditioning, and to our emotional responses, that it might be completely opaque to a being with a different sensory apparatus or cognitive structure. But that does not diminish the value of including it. The music is not really for the aliens. It is for us. It is a statement about what we value, what we find beautiful, what we want to preserve. And it is an invitation to anyone who might find it to listen, to try to understand, and perhaps to recognize something universal in the act of making music, even if the specific sounds are strange or unfamiliar. Now let's turn our attention to the natural sounds that were included on the record, the voices of Earth itself, captured in recordings of wind, water, animals, and the planet's geological processes. The natural sounds section of the Golden Record is one of its most evocative and unusual parts. It includes sounds that most people would not typically think to include in a message to extraterrestrials. Thunder rumbling across a plain. Waves crashing against a shore. The calls of whales echoing through the ocean depths. These are sounds that speak to the physical reality of our planet, to the forces of nature that have shaped life on Earth for billions of years. The team included these sounds because they felt it was important to convey not just human culture, but the environment in which that culture developed. Earth is a planet shaped by water, by weather, by the movement of tectonic plates and the rhythms of day and night. Any understanding of humanity requires understanding the world we come from. The sounds were carefully selected and recorded. Some were taken from existing sound libraries. Others were recorded specifically for the project. The team listened to hundreds of potential sounds, evaluating them for clarity, representativeness, and emotional impact. They wanted sounds that would be immediately recognizable to anyone on Earth, but also sounds that captured something essential about the planet's character. The section begins with the sound of wind. Wind is caused by the uneven heating of Earth's atmosphere by the sun, which creates differences in air pressure. Air flows from high-pressure areas to low-pressure areas, and we experience that flow as wind. The recording captures the sound of wind moving through trees, a rustling, breathing sound that rises and falls. It is a gentle sound, peaceful, but it also hints at the power of the atmosphere to move and shape the world. Next comes rain. Rain is the sound of water returning to Earth after being evaporated by the sun and carried into the atmosphere. The recording captures the patter of raindrops falling on leaves and ground, a sound that has been heard on Earth for as long as there has been liquid water on the surface. Rain is essential to life. It fills rivers and lakes, nourishes plants, and cycles water through the environment. The sound of rain is soothing to many people, a connection to the natural world that feels primal and timeless. Then comes surf, the sound of waves breaking on a shore. Waves are created by wind blowing across the surface of the ocean, transferring energy to the water. That energy travels through the water as waves, which eventually break when they reach shallow water near shore. The recording captures the rhythmic crash and retreat of waves, a sound that has a meditative quality. The ocean covers more than 70% of Earth's surface, and the sound of surf is one of the defining sounds of the planet. Thunder follows. Thunder is the sound of air rapidly expanding and contracting as it is heated and cooled by a lightning bolt. Lightning occurs when electrical charges build up in storm clouds and are released in a sudden discharge. The recording captures a long, rolling peal of thunder, starting loud and gradually fading into the distance. Thunder is a sound of power, a reminder that the atmosphere can generate enormous forces. The team included volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and mud pots, sounds generated by the geological activity of Earth. These are the sounds of a planet that is still alive in a geological sense, with a molten core and moving tectonic plates. Volcanic eruptions release pressure from deep within the Earth. Earthquakes occur when those plates grind against each other and suddenly slip. Mudpots are geothermal features where hot water and gases bubble up through mud, creating a gurgling, boiling sound. These sounds represent the dynamic, ever-changing nature of Earth's geology. Then the record shifts to the sounds of life. The team included a wide variety of animal sounds, representing different branches of the tree of life and different environments on Earth. There are birds. Birds are found on every continent and in nearly every environment, from tropical rainforests to Arctic tundra. Their songs and calls are among the most complex and varied sounds in nature. The recordings include several different bird species, capturing the diversity of avian vocalizations. Some bird songs are melodic and musical. Others are harsh or rhythmic. Birds sing to attract mates, defend territory, and communicate with each other. The complexity and beauty of bird song have fascinated humans for thousands of years. The record includes the songs of humpback whales. Humpback whales are large marine mammals that live in oceans around the world. Male humpback whales sing long, complex songs that can last for hours. The songs are structured, with repeating phrases and motifs, and they change gradually over time. Scientists are still not entirely sure why whales sing. The songs may be a form of mating display, or they may serve some other social function. The recordings used on the Golden Record come from an album called Songs of the Humpback Whale, released in 1970 by Roger Payne. That album brought the haunting, otherworldly sounds of whale song to a wide audience and helped spark the movement to protect whales from hunting. The whale songs are some of the most evocative sounds on the entire record. They are mournful, beautiful, and utterly alien. They remind us that intelligence and complexity are not limited to humans, that other species on Earth have their own forms of communication and expression. The record also includes the sounds of chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are our closest living relatives, sharing about 98% of our DNA. Their vocalizations include hoots, screams, and pant hoots, sounds they use to communicate excitement, danger, or social bonding. Including chimpanzee sounds acknowledges our evolutionary connection to the rest of the animal kingdom, a connection that is central to understanding what humans are and where we come from. There are dogs barking. Dogs were the first species domesticated by humans, and they have been our companions for tens of thousands of years. The sound of a dog barking is familiar to people around the world, a sound that represents the deep bond between humans and animals. The record includes crickets chirping. Crickets produce sound by rubbing their wings together, a process called stridulation. The sound is rhythmic and insistent, a background chorus that fills warm summer nights in many parts of the world. Crickets are insects, representing a branch of life very different from mammals and birds, yet they too have evolved complex behaviors and forms of communication. There are frogs. Frogs are amphibians, creatures that live both in water and on land. Their croaking calls are used to attract mates and mark territory. The sound of frogs is associated with wetlands, ponds, and rivers, environments that are critical to the health of ecosystems. The team included the sounds of elephants. Elephants are among the largest land animals on Earth, and they communicate using a wide range of sounds, including trumpeting calls that can carry for miles and low-frequency rumbles that travel through the ground. Elephants are intelligent, social animals with complex emotional lives. Their sounds convey the majesty and diversity of terrestrial megafauna. There are hyenas laughing. The hyena's laugh, actually a series of staccato whoops and giggles, is one of the most distinctive animal sounds. Hyenas use these vocalizations to communicate within their social groups, often during hunts or confrontations. It is a sound that is uniquely African, representing the wildlife of the savanna. The record includes the sound of a chimpanzee and a rhinoceros. Rhinoceroses are massive, solitary animals that communicate using snorts, grunts, and bellows. They are endangered, and the decision to include their sounds on the record is a reminder of the fragility of many species on Earth. All of these animal sounds serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate the diversity of life on Earth. They show that communication is not limited to humans, that many species have evolved complex ways of signaling to each other. And they convey the richness and variety of Earth's ecosystems, from oceans to forests to grasslands. But the natural sounds also serve an emotional purpose. They ground the record in the physical reality of Earth. They remind us that humanity did not emerge in a vacuum. We evolved on a planet full of other life, shaped by the same forces of nature that shaped all living things. Our story is part of a larger story, the story of life on Earth, and the natural sounds section of the record acknowledges that connection. There is also a kind of honesty in including these sounds. The record could have focused exclusively on human achievements, on technology, art, and civilization. But by including the sounds of wind, rain, and whales, the team acknowledged that we are not separate from nature. We are part of it. Our fate is tied to the health of the planet and the survival of the ecosystems that sustain us. The natural sound section is about 2 minutes long, but it packs an enormous amount of information and emotion into that brief span. It is a portrait of a living, breathing planet, a world where water flows and wind blows, where creatures call out to each other across jungles and oceans, and where geological forces are constantly reshaping the landscape. Whether an extraterrestrial listener would recognize these sounds as coming from a living planet is an open question. But to human ears, they are unmistakable. They are the sounds of home. Now let's explore one of the most remarkable sections of the Golden Record, the greetings in 55 different languages, a collection of voices speaking to the universe on behalf of all humanity. The greetings section was Linda Salzman Sagan's responsibility, and it was a massive undertaking. The idea was simple: include brief greetings in as many languages as possible, representing the linguistic diversity of Earth. But the execution was complex and challenging. First, the team had to decide which languages to include. There are thousands of languages spoken on Earth, and there was no way to include them all. The team started with a list of the 25 most widely spoken languages, figuring that would cover the majority of the world's population. If time allowed, they would add more. In the end, they managed to include 55 languages. The list ranges from ancient languages like Akkadian and Sumerian, which have not been spoken for thousands of years, to modern languages like English, Mandarin Chinese, and Spanish. The selection includes languages from every inhabited continent and represents major language families including Indo-European, Sino-Tibetan, Afro-Asiatic, Niger-Congo, Austronesian, and others. The greetings themselves are remarkably diverse. Some are formal and ceremonial. Others are warm and personal. Some reference the cosmic context of the message, while others are simple expressions of goodwill. Each greeting was left to the individual speaker to compose, with the only guideline being that it should be brief and represent a greeting to potential extraterrestrials. The very first greeting is in Akkadian, one of the oldest written languages known. Akkadian was spoken in ancient Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq, around 4,000 years ago. The greeting, translated into English, says, "May all be very well." It is simple and direct, a wish for peace and well-being that echoes across millennia. The inclusion of Akkadian and Sumerian, another ancient language, was deliberate. The team wanted to show the depth of human linguistic history, to demonstrate that language has been a part of human culture for thousands of years. These ancient languages connect us to civilizations that rose and fell long before the modern world, reminding us that humanity's story is long and complex. The greetings then move through a dizzying array of languages. There is Aramaic, the language Jesus spoke. There is ancient Greek and Latin, languages that shaped Western civilization. There are languages from the Indian subcontinent, including Hindi, Bengali, Gujarati, Marathi, Punjabi, Urdu, and others. The Indian community at Cornell University, where much of the recording took place, was instrumental in providing speakers for these languages. There are languages from East Asia, including Mandarin Chinese, Cantonese, Wu, Amoy, Korean, and Japanese. China alone has multiple linguistic traditions, and the team tried to represent that diversity by including several Chinese dialects. Each has its own distinct sound and grammatical structure, though they share a common writing system. There are African languages, including Nguni, which is part of the Zulu language family, and ILA, spoken in Zambia. Africa is the most linguistically diverse continent on Earth, with thousands of distinct languages. The record could only scratch the surface, but the team tried to include at least some representation. There are European languages beyond English, including French, German, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, Polish, Czech, Swedish, Dutch, Romanian, Hungarian, Ukrainian, Serbian, and Welsh. Europe's linguistic landscape is the result of thousands of years of migration, conquest, and cultural exchange, and the languages reflect that complex history. There are languages from the Middle East and Central Asia, including Arabic, Hebrew, Persian, and Turkish. These are languages with ancient roots and rich literary traditions, languages that have shaped religion, philosophy, and science. There are languages from Southeast Asia and the Pacific, including Indonesian, Thai, Vietnamese, and Burmese. There are indigenous languages from the Americas, including Quechua, also known as Quechua, spoken in the Andes Mountains of South America. And nestled among all these adult voices is the voice of a 6-year-old boy named Nick Sagan, Carl Sagan's son. Nick recorded the greeting in English, "Hello from the children of planet Earth." His voice is clear, high, and utterly sincere. There is something deeply moving about hearing a child's voice on a record meant to last for billions of years. It reminds us that the message is not just from the adults who created it, but from all of humanity, including the generations yet to come. The content of the greetings varies widely. Some are simple, "Hello," "Peace," "Greetings." Others are more elaborate. The greeting in Mandarin Chinese says, "Hope everyone's well. We are thinking about you all. Please come here to visit when you have time." There is a warmth and hospitality in that greeting, an invitation to connection. The greeting in Swedish is charmingly specific, "Greetings from a computer programmer in the little university town of Ithaca on the planet Earth." It locates the speaker not just in space, but in a particular social and technological context. It acknowledges that this message is coming from a specific moment in human history, a time when computers were still relatively new and programming was an emerging profession. The greeting in Turkish is poetic, "Dear Turkish-speaking friends, may the honors of the morning be upon your heads." It draws on a traditional form of greeting that wishes blessings upon the listener. The greeting in Latin is formal and philosophical, "Greetings to you, whoever you are, we have goodwill towards you and bring peace across space." It acknowledges the uncertainty of who might receive the message and emphasizes peaceful intent. Some greetings reference the cosmic scale of the message. The greeting in Oriya says, "Greetings to the inhabitants of the universe from the third planet Earth of the star Sun." It provides context, locating Earth in relation to our star and implicitly in relation to other potential planetary systems. The greetings were recorded in a studio at Cornell University over several days in the spring of 1977. Linda Salzman Sagan organized the sessions, coordinating with language departments and community members to find speakers. It was chaotic. Speakers arrived at different times. Some had scheduling conflicts and had to be replaced at the last minute. The team was still searching for speakers even while recording sessions were underway. The process revealed the linguistic diversity not just of Earth, but of the Cornell community itself. Graduate students, professors, international students, and local residents all contributed. The recordings were made on relatively simple equipment, capturing the natural tone and rhythm of each language without processing or effects. One of the challenges was ensuring that each greeting was actually in the language claimed. The team relied on speakers to be honest and accurate, but they had no way to verify the content of languages they did not speak themselves. They had to trust that the speakers understood the purpose and treated it with the seriousness it deserved. There were a few disappointments. Swahili, one of the most widely spoken languages in Africa, is not included because the planned speaker did not show up and no replacement could be found in time. Some other languages the team hoped to include also fell through due to scheduling or availability issues. These gaps are unfortunate, but they reflect the realities of working under a tight deadline with limited resources. The greetings section lasts just under 4 minutes. It is a whirlwind tour through human linguistic diversity, 55 voices speaking one after another, each in their own language, each offering their own message of peace and greeting. The effect is both overwhelming and deeply moving. You do not need to understand the words to feel the intent behind them. The voices are human, warm, and earnest. They are reaching out, trying to connect, hoping to be heard. The greetings were intended for 2 audiences, just like the rest of the record. For any potential extraterrestrial listener, the greetings demonstrate that Earth is home to a single species that has developed thousands of different languages. That fact alone says something important about humanity. It shows that we are diverse, that we have developed different cultures and ways of speaking, but that we are all fundamentally the same species attempting to communicate. For the human audience, the greetings serve a different purpose. They remind us of the incredible diversity of languages and cultures on Earth. They acknowledge that no single language or culture can speak for all of humanity. The message to the stars is a collective one, assembled from many voices, each contributing their own unique sound and meaning. The greetings also raise philosophical questions about language and meaning. Can a greeting be understood without shared context? If an extraterrestrial being hears these voices, will they recognize them as attempts at communication? Will they understand that the different sounds represent different languages, or will they hear it all as incomprehensible noise? These are questions the team grappled with. They decided that even if the words themselves could not be understood, the act of speaking, the intentionality behind the voices, might still come through. There is information in the prosody, the rhythm and tone of speech, that transcends specific linguistic content. A greeting sounds different from a command. A question sounds different from a statement. Even without understanding the words, a listener might recognize that these are voices attempting to communicate, to reach out, to make contact. And at the very least, the greetings show that we tried. We sent not one voice, but 55. We acknowledged our diversity. We spoke in languages ancient and modern, from cultures all around the world. We tried to represent the full spectrum of human linguistic achievement. And we sent it all out into space, hoping that somewhere, sometime, someone might hear it and know that we were here. Now let's turn our attention to the images encoded on the Golden Record, a collection of 116 photographs and diagrams that attempt to show what Earth and its inhabitants look like. The photographs and diagrams encoded on the Golden Record represent one of the most technically challenging aspects of the entire project. Encoding visual information onto an audio record required developing a method that could be decoded by someone with no knowledge of human technology, using only the instructions etched on the record's cover. The team devised a system based on analog television technology of the era, encoding each image as a series of vertical scan lines that could be reconstructed into a picture. Each image on the record is composed of 512 vertical lines, creating a resolution that by today's standards would seem crude, but for 1977 represented a reasonable balance between image quality and the amount of space available on the record. The images were encoded in shades of gray, though a few color images were included by encoding 3 separate images in sequence, one each for the red, green, and blue color channels. A sophisticated finder could combine these 3 images to reconstruct the original colors. The selection of images was as contentious and difficult as the selection of music. The team had to choose from all the photographs and images that existed of Earth, its people, its landscapes, and its achievements. They wanted images that were beautiful, informative, representative, and comprehensible. They wanted to show the diversity of human cultures without reinforcing stereotypes. They wanted to show natural beauty without being limited to pristine wilderness. They wanted to show human achievement without appearing boastful or aggressive. The first images on the record are scientific and mathematical in nature. These serve multiple purposes. They establish a common language of mathematics and physics that any scientifically advanced civilization would presumably understand. They also provide a scale and context for the images that follow. The very first image is a calibration circle, used to ensure that whoever decodes the record has the correct aspect ratio and is reconstructing the images properly. The early images include mathematical and physical definitions. There are diagrams showing the concept of number in binary notation. There are representations of mathematical constants like pi. There are diagrams showing the structure of atoms, the double helix of DNA, and the process of cell division. These images establish fundamental concepts that underpin all of biology and chemistry as we understand them. The team included an image showing the process of conception and fetal development. This was a deliberate choice to explain human reproduction, a fundamental aspect of our biology. The images show a sperm cell meeting an egg, the resulting fertilized ovum, and stages of fetal development in the womb. This sequence explains where humans come from in the most literal biological sense. It shows that we reproduce sexually, that we develop inside a parent's body, and that we begin as single cells that divide and differentiate into complex organisms. There are images of human anatomy, showing the skeletal structure, musculature, and organ systems. These images, drawn from medical textbooks, show what humans look like beneath the skin. They reveal that we are vertebrates, that we have an internal skeleton, a centralized nervous system, and specialized organs for different functions. These are facts about human biology that would be true regardless of culture or time period. The record includes images showing the structure and development of living things beyond humans. There is a diagram showing vertebrate evolution, created by John Lomberg. This diagram traces the evolutionary path from fish to amphibians to reptiles to mammals, showing how life on Earth has changed over hundreds of millions of years. It is a visual representation of Darwin's theory of evolution, one of the most important scientific insights in human history. The diagram includes anatomically accurate drawings of humans, both male and female, shown nude to accurately represent our physical form. There are images of landscapes from around the world. The team wanted to show the diversity of Earth's environments, from deserts to forests, from mountains to seashores. There is an image of the Grand Tetons and the Snake River, taken by photographer Ansel Adams. This image captures the majesty of the American West, with sharp mountain peaks rising above a winding river valley. The composition is dramatic, showing both the scale of geological formations and the presence of liquid water, a key ingredient for life as we know it. There is an image of sand dunes, showing the patterns created by wind moving across loose sediment. The dunes have a sculptural quality, with smooth curves and sharp ridgelines. This image shows how wind can shape landscapes on a massive scale, creating forms that are both beautiful and mathematically interesting. There is an image of a forest scene with mushrooms. This shows the vegetation of a temperate forest, with trees, undergrowth, and fungi. Mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of fungi, organisms that are neither plants nor animals but form their own kingdom of life. Including them shows the diversity of life forms on Earth beyond the obvious categories of animals and plants. There is an image of Monument Valley, in the southwestern United States, showing the distinctive rock formations that rise from the desert floor. These formations are the remnants of ancient sandstone layers that have been eroded over millions of years, leaving behind isolated towers and mesas. The image shows both the power of erosion and the vast timescales over which geological processes operate. There are images of fallen leaves on the ground, showing the cycle of growth, death, and decay that characterizes Earth's ecosystems. Leaves grow on trees, photosynthesize sunlight into energy, fall in autumn, and decompose, returning nutrients to the soil. This cycle has repeated for hundreds of millions of years, ever since plants first moved onto land. There is a close-up image of a snowflake over a sequoia tree, showing the intricate crystalline structure of ice. Snowflakes form when water vapor freezes in the atmosphere, and the shape of each crystal is determined by temperature and humidity as it falls. No two snowflakes are exactly alike, a fact that demonstrates the complexity that can emerge from simple physical processes. The record includes images of animal life. There is an image of dolphins swimming in the ocean. Dolphins are marine mammals, intelligent and social creatures that communicate using complex vocalizations. They represent the diversity of life in Earth's oceans. There is an image of a school of fish, hundreds of individuals moving in coordinated patterns. This shows collective behavior, a phenomenon seen in many species where individuals follow simple rules that give rise to complex group dynamics. There is an image of a tree toad, a small amphibian clinging to a branch. Amphibians are creatures that live both in water and on land, representing an important transition in the evolution of terrestrial life. There is an image of a crocodile, a large reptile that has changed little over millions of years. Crocodiles are apex predators in many freshwater environments, and they represent the persistence of ancient body plans that have proven successful over evolutionary timescales. There is an image of an eagle, a bird of prey with keen eyesight and powerful talons. Eagles are found on every continent except Antarctica, and they have been symbols of power and freedom in many human cultures. There is an image of a waterhole in Africa with various animals gathered to drink. This image shows the biodiversity of the African savanna and the importance of water as a resource that brings different species together. It also hints at the ecosystems that existed on Earth millions of years ago, when our early ancestors walked those same landscapes. There is an image of Jane Goodall with chimpanzees. This photograph, taken during Goodall's groundbreaking research in Tanzania, shows a human interacting peacefully with our closest living relatives. Goodall's work demonstrated that chimpanzees use tools, have complex social structures, and exhibit behaviors that were previously thought to be uniquely human. The image shows that we recognize our kinship with other species and that we study them to better understand ourselves. The record includes images of human beings from various cultures. The team worked hard to represent the diversity of human appearance and culture, showing people of different ages, ethnicities, and from different parts of the world. There is an image of Bushman hunters from southern Africa. The San people, often called Bushmen, are among the oldest human populations, with genetic evidence suggesting their lineage stretches back tens of thousands of years. They traditionally lived as hunter-gatherers, a way of life that characterized most of human existence until the development of agriculture about 10,000 years ago. The image shows them with their traditional tools and clothing, representing a way of life that is rapidly disappearing. There is an image of a dancer from Bali, Indonesia. The dancer is in traditional costume, frozen in a moment of performance. Balinese dance is highly stylized, with specific movements and gestures that carry meaning. The image represents the artistic and cultural traditions that have developed across human societies. There is an image of Andean girls, two young women from South America, dressed in traditional clothing. Their faces are calm and serious, looking directly at the camera. The image shows the indigenous peoples of the Americas and their distinctive cultural traditions. There is an image of a craftsman from Thailand, working with tools. This shows human skill and the manual trades that have been essential to civilization, from pottery to metalworking to woodcarving. There is an image of an elephant with a person, showing the relationship between humans and large animals in parts of Asia where elephants have been domesticated and used for labor and transportation for thousands of years. There is an image of an old man with a beard and glasses, from Turkey. His face is weathered and thoughtful, showing the marks of age and experience. The image represents the elderly, the keepers of memory and wisdom in many cultures. There is an image of an old man with a dog and flowers. This shows the companionship between humans and dogs, a relationship that goes back at least 15,000 years and possibly much longer. It also shows the human appreciation for beauty in the form of cultivated flowers. There is an image of a mountain climber, a person scaling a steep rock face. This shows human adventurousness, the desire to explore and challenge ourselves, to go to places that are difficult or dangerous simply because they are there. There is an image of a gymnast, a woman performing an athletic feat that requires strength, balance, and years of training. This shows human physical capability and the ways we push the limits of what our bodies can do. The record includes images of human daily life and work. There is an image of a cotton harvest, showing agricultural labor. Agriculture transformed human society, allowing populations to grow and civilizations to develop. The image shows people gathering cotton, a crop that has been economically and historically significant, though it is also tied to the painful history of slavery and exploitation. There is an image of a grape picker, showing viticulture, the cultivation of grapes for wine. Winemaking is one of the oldest forms of food preservation and fermentation, with evidence of wine production dating back thousands of years. There is an image of an underwater scene with a diver and fish. This shows human exploration of the oceans, the invention of technology that allows us to enter environments where we cannot naturally survive. There is an image of people cooking fish, showing food preparation. Cooking is a uniquely human behavior that transforms raw ingredients into more digestible and palatable meals. The use of fire for cooking may have been a key development in human evolution, allowing our ancestors to extract more nutrition from their food. There is an image of a Chinese dinner party, showing people gathered around a table laden with food. This represents the social dimension of eating, the way meals bring people together and serve as occasions for conversation and community. The record includes images of human architecture and settlements. There is an image of the Great Wall of China, one of the most ambitious construction projects in human history. The wall stretches thousands of miles across northern China, built over centuries to protect against invasions. It shows human engineering capability and the organization required to complete projects that span generations. There is an image of a construction scene in Amish country, showing a traditional barn raising. The Amish are a religious group that maintains a relatively simple lifestyle, avoiding many modern technologies. The image shows collective labor, with many people working together to build a structure. It represents community cooperation and traditional building methods. There is an image of a house in New England, a simple wooden structure representing domestic architecture in North America. Houses provide shelter, privacy, and a space for family life. The particular style shown reflects the European architectural traditions brought to America by colonists. There is an image of a house interior with an artist and a fire. The interior is warm and lived in, showing the private domestic space where much of human life unfolds. The presence of an artist suggests creativity and the production of art within the home. There is an image of the Taj Mahal in India. The Taj Mahal is a mausoleum built in the 17th century by the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan for his wife Mumtaz Mahal. It is one of the most beautiful buildings ever constructed, combining Islamic, Persian, and Indian architectural elements. The image shows human aesthetic achievement and the lengths to which people will go to honor those they love. There is an image of Oxford, England, showing the historic architecture of one of the world's oldest universities. The image represents education, scholarship, and the accumulation and transmission of knowledge across generations. There is an image of Boston, a modern American city, showing tall buildings and urban density. This represents the contemporary urban environment where millions of people live in close proximity, connected by infrastructure and institutions. There is an image of the Sydney Opera House in Australia. This modern architectural masterpiece, with its distinctive shell-like roof structures, shows 20th century design and engineering. It is both functional, serving as a performance venue, and sculptural, a work of art in its own right. The record includes images of human technology and scientific achievement. There is an image of an artisan with a drill, showing manual tool use. Tools are fundamental to human culture. Our ability to create and use tools sets us apart from most other species and has allowed us to manipulate our environment in profound ways. There is an image of a factory interior, showing industrial production. The Industrial Revolution transformed human society, moving production from small-scale crafts to large-scale manufacturing. Factories enabled the mass production of goods but also created new forms of labor and social organization. There is an image of a museum, showing the display of art and artifacts. Museums are institutions for preserving and presenting culture, history, and knowledge. They show that humans value the past and want to learn from it. There is an image of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. This suspension bridge, completed in 1937, was an engineering marvel of its time. It spans the entrance to San Francisco Bay and has become an iconic symbol of the city. The image shows human ability to build structures that are both functional and beautiful, that overcome natural obstacles through engineering. There is an image of a train, showing rail transportation. Trains revolutionized travel and commerce in the 19th century, allowing people and goods to move quickly over long distances. The image represents the industrial age and the networks of transportation that connect human societies. There is an image of an airport, specifically Toronto International Airport. This shows modern air travel, a technology that has made the world smaller by allowing people to cross continents and oceans in hours rather than months. Airports are nodes in a global network of movement and exchange. There is an image of an Antarctic expedition, showing humans in extreme environments. Antarctica is the coldest, driest, windiest continent on Earth, and it remained unexplored by humans until the early 20th century. The image shows scientific research in harsh conditions and the human drive to explore even the most inhospitable places on Earth. There is an image of a radio telescope, specifically the Westerbork Radio Observatory in the Netherlands. Radio telescopes detect radio waves from space, allowing astronomers to observe phenomena that are invisible in optical light. This image represents the search for knowledge beyond Earth, the use of technology to explore the universe. The record includes an image of a page from Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica, one of the most important scientific works ever written. Published in 1687, the Principia laid out the laws of motion and universal gravitation, providing a mathematical framework for understanding the physical universe. The inclusion of this page shows the development of scientific thought and the power of mathematics to describe nature. There is an image showing the Earth from space, specifically a photograph of the Nile River, the Red Sea, and the Sinai Peninsula, with annotations showing the chemical composition of Earth's atmosphere. This image provides an external view of Earth, showing what the planet looks like from orbit. The chemical annotations explain that Earth's atmosphere is composed primarily of nitrogen and oxygen, with smaller amounts of other gases. This information could help an extraterrestrial civilization understand the conditions on Earth and the requirements for life as we know it. The final image on the record is a photograph of a string quartet, the Quartetto Italiano, performing music. This brings the visual portion of the record full circle, connecting back to the musical content. It shows humans engaged in artistic performance, working together to create beauty through sound. These 116 images represent an extraordinary diversity of subjects and perspectives. They show Earth from space and up close, in landscapes and microscopic detail. They show human beings in all their variety. They show our biology, our cultures, our cities, our technologies, and our achievements. They show both the natural world and the ways humans have modified that world. They show life in its many forms, from single-celled organisms to complex multicellular creatures. But like the musical selections, the images also reveal the limitations and biases of the selection process. Western culture is heavily represented, particularly American and European subjects. This partly reflects the team's own cultural context and partly reflects the availability of high-quality photographs. In 1977, photography was expensive and not evenly distributed globally. Many cultures and regions were not well documented photographically, or the photographs that existed were not accessible to the team in the short time they had. The images also present an idealized view of humanity. There are no images of war, poverty, pollution, or conflict. The closest the record comes to acknowledging the darker aspects of human existence are some of the medical images showing disease, but even these are clinical and educational rather than disturbing. NASA insisted on this approach, wanting the record to present Earth and humanity in the best possible light. Some critics have argued that this makes the record dishonest, that it presents a sanitized version of humanity that ignores our capacity for violence and destruction. Others have countered that the record was always meant to be a greeting, an introduction, and that leading with our worst qualities would be inappropriate. The debate continues, with no clear resolution. The technical achievement of encoding these images onto a phonograph record should not be underestimated. In 1977, this was cutting-edge work, requiring expertise in analog electronics, signal processing, and encoding theory. The team had to ensure that the images could be reliably decoded even after the record had traveled through space for potentially millions or billions of years. They had to account for possible damage from cosmic radiation or micrometeorite impacts. They had to make the instructions as clear as possible while keeping them simple enough to be understood by someone with no knowledge of human technology. The images on the Golden Record are a snapshot of Earth in 1977. They show the world as it was at a specific moment in time, filtered through the perspectives and values of the people who selected them. In the decades since, the world has changed dramatically. Many of the technologies shown in the images are now obsolete. Many of the cultural practices have evolved or disappeared. But the images remain, locked in their analog format, traveling through space as a permanent record of what we were and what we valued. Now let's explore the technical specifications of the Golden Record itself, the physical object that carries all of this information, and the detailed instructions for how to decode and play it. The Golden Record is not actually made of gold, though it is gold-plated. The base material is copper, chosen for its durability and its ability to hold fine grooves without degrading. The copper disc was coated first with nickel and then with a thin layer of gold. Gold was chosen for the plating because it does not corrode or tarnish, even over billions of years in the vacuum of space. The gold layer protects the underlying copper and ensures that the grooves containing the audio and visual information remain intact. The record is 12 inches in diameter, the standard size for long-playing records in 1977. This size was chosen because it was familiar and because it provided enough surface area to encode all the content the team wanted to include. The record is designed to be played at 16 2/3 revolutions per minute, which is slower than the standard 33 1/3 RPM of most records. This slower speed allowed more information to be packed into the grooves. The record contains approximately 90 minutes of audio content, including the spoken greetings, the sounds of Earth, and the musical selections. The 116 images are encoded in the first portion of the record, before the audio content. Each image takes up a small amount of space, encoded as an audio signal that represents the brightness of each point in the image. The record is protected by an aluminum cover. This cover serves multiple purposes. It shields the record from micrometeorite impacts, which are tiny particles of dust and rock that travel through space at high velocities. Even a small impact could damage the delicate grooves of the record if it struck directly. The aluminum cover absorbs these impacts, protecting the record beneath. The cover also serves as an information carrier. Etched into the cover are detailed instructions for playing the record and interpreting its contents. These instructions are rendered in symbolic language, using diagrams and binary numbers rather than words. The assumption is that any civilization advanced enough to intercept the spacecraft and recognize it as an artifact would have scientific knowledge comparable to or exceeding our own, and would therefore be able to interpret mathematical and physical symbols. The cover shows a diagram of the record and the stylus in the correct position to begin playback. The stylus and cartridge are included with the record, mounted in a protective container attached to the spacecraft. These are the same type of components used in standard record players of the era, made of materials chosen for their durability. The stylus is tipped with diamond, one of the hardest materials known, capable of tracking the grooves without wearing down. The cover includes binary numbers indicating the correct speed for playback. The numbers are written in base 2 notation, using only ones and zeros. The time unit used is defined in terms of the fundamental transition of the hydrogen atom, which emits radiation at a specific frequency. This frequency is a universal constant that any scientifically advanced civilization would recognize. By using this time unit, the cover can specify the playback speed in a way that does not depend on any human measurement system. The cover shows how the images are encoded. There is a diagram illustrating how the vertical scan line should be assembled into a two-dimensional image. There is a representation of the first image, the calibration circle, so that whoever is decoding the record can verify they are reconstructing the images correctly. If the circle appears as an ellipse or some other shape, they know they need to adjust the aspect ratio. The cover includes the pulsar map, the same design used on the Pioneer plaques. This map shows the location of Earth relative to 14 pulsars, rapidly rotating neutron stars that emit beams of radiation at precise intervals. Each pulsar has a unique period, and by measuring these periods, a finder could triangulate Earth's position in the galaxy. The pulsar periods change slowly over time as the stars lose energy, so by comparing the measured periods to those shown on the map, a finder could also calculate how long ago the record was created. The map includes a small diagram of the solar system, showing the Sun and the planets in their correct positions. Earth is marked clearly, indicating that this is the planet where the record originated. The distances between planets are shown to scale, and the sizes of the planets are also indicated. This provides context for understanding Earth's location within its own star system. The cover includes a diagram of the hydrogen atom, showing the two lowest energy states and the transition between them. This is the same transition used to define the time unit for the playback speed. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, and the physics of the hydrogen atom is a universal constant. Any civilization with knowledge of atomic physics would recognize this diagram and understand its significance. Embedded in the cover is a small sample of uranium-238. This is a radioactive element that decays into other elements at a known rate. The half-life of uranium-238 is approximately 4.47 billion years, which means that after that time, half of the uranium will have decayed into lead and other elements. By measuring the ratio of uranium to its decay products, a sufficiently advanced civilization could determine how long the record has been traveling. This provides a kind of radioactive clock, allowing the finder to date the record even if they discover it billions of years in the future. The inclusion of uranium-238 was not without controversy. Some members of the team worried about including radioactive material on the spacecraft, even in such small quantities. But the scientific value of providing a way to date the record was deemed worth the minimal risk. The amount of uranium is tiny, not enough to pose any danger, but enough to provide a measurable signal for dating purposes. The manufacturing of the records was carried out by specialized companies with expertise in record production. The blank copper discs were provided by Pyral SA, a French company. CBS Records contracted with the JVC Cutting Center in Boulder, Colorado, to cut the lacquer masters, which are the original recordings from which copies are made. The masters were then sent to the James G. Lee Record Processing Center in Gardena, California, where the final records were cut, plated, and prepared for delivery to NASA. The process of manufacturing the records was meticulous. Each step had to be done carefully to ensure the highest possible quality. The grooves had to be cut precisely, with no errors or skips. The plating had to be uniform, with no thin spots where corrosion could eventually penetrate. The final records were inspected and tested to verify they could be played back correctly. One detail that nearly caused a problem was a hand-etched inscription in the dead wax area of the record, the space between the label and the playable surface. Someone on the team, reportedly Timothy Ferris, etched the phrase to the makers of music, "all worlds, all times," into this area. This was not part of the original specifications, and when NASA saw it, they initially rejected the record, demanding a blank replacement. Carl Sagan intervened and convinced the administrator to allow the inscription to remain. It is a small detail, a personal touch added by someone who wanted to acknowledge the universal nature of music making. The records were completed and delivered to NASA with very little time to spare. They were mounted on the exterior of the Voyager spacecraft, attached to a bracket designed to hold them securely during launch and throughout the mission. The aluminum cover was closed and sealed, protecting the record inside. The spacecraft themselves are marvels of engineering. Each Voyager carries 11 scientific instruments designed to study the planets, their moons, and the environment of space. They are powered by radioisotope thermoelectric generators, devices that convert the heat from radioactive decay of plutonium-238 into electricity. These generators have no moving parts and are incredibly reliable, which is why the Voyagers have been able to operate for more than 4 decades. The Voyagers are small by modern spacecraft standards, each weighing about 1,590 pounds. They are built on a lightweight frame, with a large antenna dish for communicating with Earth and various instruments mounted on booms and platforms. The Golden Record, mounted on the side of the spacecraft, is one of the smallest components but arguably one of the most significant. The longevity of the Golden Record is almost incomprehensible. While the spacecraft themselves will eventually lose power and fall silent, the record will endure. In the vacuum of space, there is no air or water to cause corrosion. There are no microorganisms to cause decay. The record will remain essentially unchanged for billions of years, long after the Sun has died and the Earth has been consumed. Scientists have estimated that the record could remain playable for more than 1 billion years, possibly longer. The gold plating will protect the underlying copper from the few sources of degradation that exist in space, primarily cosmic rays and micrometeorite impacts. The aluminum cover provides additional protection, and the record is positioned in a way that minimizes its exposure to the direction of travel. But playability is only part of the equation. For the record to fulfill its purpose, it must be found. And the chances of that happening are vanishingly small. The Voyagers are traveling through the emptiness of interstellar space, where even the closest stars are light years apart. The spacecraft will pass close to other stars eventually, but close in astronomical terms still means trillions of miles. Unless a civilization is actively monitoring for artificial objects passing through their region of space, the Voyagers will likely go unnoticed. Carl Sagan understood this. He knew that the record would almost certainly never be found, and that even if it were found, it might be so far in the future that humanity itself would be long gone. But he also understood that the act of creating the record was valuable in itself. It forced us to think about how we would present ourselves to others. It made us reflect on what we value and what we want to preserve. And it created a document that, even if never found by aliens, would endure as a testament to human creativity, optimism, and hope. The Golden Record is, in a very real sense, a message in a bottle cast into an infinite ocean. We do not know if anyone will ever find it. We do not know if anyone is out there to find it. But we sent it anyway, because the act of sending it mattered. It said that we are here, that we exist, that we want to be known. And in saying that, we learned something about ourselves. Now let's explore some of the controversial decisions made during the creation of the record, the debates and disagreements that shaped what was included and what was left out. Every choice the team made for the Golden Record involved trade-offs and compromises. With limited space and time, they had to prioritize certain content over other content. And because the team members came from different backgrounds and had different perspectives, they did not always agree on what should be included. One of the most contentious decisions involved the Beatles. As mentioned earlier, the team wanted to include the song Here Comes the Sun by George Harrison. The Beatles were arguably the most culturally significant musical group of the 20th century, and their omission from the record is notable. The band members themselves were reportedly in favor of the idea. John Lennon, when contacted, gave his blessing and even recommended Jimmy Iovine as the sound engineer for the project. But the music rights were controlled by EMI, the record company, and EMI refused to grant permission. The company wanted an exorbitant licensing fee, reportedly $50,000 per copy of the record, which would have totaled $100,000 for both Voyager spacecraft. To put that in perspective, the entire budget for creating the record was officially $1,500, though the actual cost ran closer to $18,000. There was no way the team could afford EMI's fee. And Drew Yang later reflected on this decision with frustration and sadness. She called it a tragedy that corporate greed prevented one of humanity's most beloved songs from being included on a record that would last for billions of years. The opportunity to give that song a kind of immortality was lost because the rights holders were more concerned with extracting money than with the cultural and historical significance of the project. However, Timothy Ferris, the producer of the record, later disputed this account. In a 2017 article, Ferris stated that Here Comes the Sun was never seriously considered for inclusion, suggesting that the story of EMI's refusal may have been exaggerated or misremembered. The truth of what happened may never be fully known, but the fact that the Beatles are not represented on the Golden Record remains a source of regret for many people involved with the project. Another source of controversy was Alan Lomax's objection to including rock and roll at all. Lomax was an ethnomusicologist who had spent decades recording traditional folk music from around the world. He had a deep respect for musical traditions that were rooted in specific cultures and passed down through generations. In his view, rock and roll was a commercial, mass-produced form of music that did not have the same cultural depth or authenticity as traditional forms. When Carl Sagan proposed including Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good, Lomax reportedly objected, calling rock music adolescent. Sagan's response was characteristically direct: there are a lot of adolescents on the planet. His point was that popular music, even if it seems trivial or ephemeral, is a legitimate part of human culture. Millions of people around the world listened to rock and roll, and it had influenced countless other musical styles. To exclude it entirely would be to ignore a major aspect of 20th century culture. The debate highlighted a fundamental tension in the project. Should the record focus on traditional, time-tested cultural forms that had endured for centuries or millennia? Or should it include contemporary culture, even if that culture might seem less significant or less enduring? The team ultimately decided to include both, with traditional folk music alongside Western classical music and rock and roll. But the decision was not made without disagreement. Another controversial aspect of the project was the decision to exclude images of war, violence, poverty, and suffering. NASA was adamant that the record should present a positive image of humanity. The agency did not want to send a message that might be interpreted as aggressive or that might suggest humanity was a violent or self-destructive species. Carl Sagan and some other team members felt this was dishonest. They argued that any accurate portrait of humanity had to include the darker aspects of our existence. War has been a constant throughout human history. Poverty, disease, and suffering are part of the human experience. To exclude these entirely would be to create a sanitized, idealized version of humanity that did not reflect reality. But NASA had the final say, and the agency's position prevailed. The record includes no images of weapons, no images of war, no images of poverty or slums. The only hint of conflict is indirect, such as the image of the Great Wall of China, which was built for defensive purposes, or some of the musical selections that touch on themes of struggle or loss. Critics have pointed out that this creates an incomplete picture. An extraterrestrial civilization that found the record and decoded it might conclude that Earth is a peaceful paradise where everyone has enough to eat and no one fights. That would be a misleading impression. On the other hand, defenders of the decision argue that the record was always meant to be a greeting, an introduction, and that emphasizing our worst qualities would be inappropriate. You would not introduce yourself to a stranger by immediately listing all your flaws and failures. You would lead with your strengths and hope for understanding. The debate raises deeper questions about honesty, representation, and the purpose of the record. Is it more important to be accurate, even if that means including difficult or uncomfortable content? Or is it more important to be aspirational, to show the best of what humanity can be, even if we have not always lived up to that ideal? There is no clear answer, and the team had to make a judgment call under time pressure and institutional constraints. Another controversial decision involved the nude images. As mentioned earlier, NASA was sensitive about nudity after receiving criticism for the Pioneer plaques, which included line drawings of a naked man and woman. Some conservative groups in the United States objected to the drawings, calling them obscene or inappropriate. NASA, which depends on congressional funding and public support, wanted to avoid another round of criticism. The team argued that showing the human form accurately required showing it without clothing. Clothing is a cultural artifact that varies by time, place, and fashion. To show humans only in clothing would be to show a very narrow and specific version of humanity. But NASA insisted on a compromise. The team included a silhouette of a nude couple, which showed the general body shape without anatomical detail. However, they also managed to include anatomically accurate nude figures in John Lomberg's vertebrate evolution diagram, where the nudity was presented in a scientific and educational context. The compromise satisfied NASA but left some team members feeling frustrated. They felt they had been forced to censor an accurate representation of human biology because of cultural taboos that would be meaningless to any extraterrestrial civilization. An alien finding the record would have no concept of human attitudes toward nudity and would not understand why the images were partially obscured. Religious content was another sensitive area. The team included some religious music, such as gospel blues and sacred chants, but they avoided explicitly religious imagery or messages. This was partly to maintain a secular, scientific tone and partly to avoid favoring one religion over another. Earth is home to thousands of religious traditions, and there was no way to represent them all fairly in the limited space available. The decision not to include explicit religious content has been criticized by some who feel that religion is a central part of human culture and should have been represented more prominently. Others have defended the decision, arguing that science and mathematics are more likely to be comprehensible to an extraterrestrial civilization than religious concepts, which are deeply tied to specific cultural contexts. The team also debated how much to emphasize human technological achievement versus natural beauty and traditional cultures. Some members felt the record should showcase humanity's scientific and technological progress, demonstrating that we are a civilization capable of space travel and sophisticated engineering. Others felt the record should emphasize our connection to the natural world and the diversity of cultures that exist on Earth, many of which have little to do with advanced technology. The final product includes both. There are images of radio telescopes, factories, and modern cities alongside images of indigenous peoples, traditional crafts, and natural landscapes. The musical selections range from ancient folk songs to Stravinsky's modernist Rite of Spring. The balance is imperfect, but it reflects an attempt to show multiple facets of human existence. One aspect of the record that has received less attention but is arguably the most personal and intimate is Andruan's brainwave recording. This is a strange and remarkable inclusion that deserves its own detailed exploration. In addition to all the sounds, music, images, and greetings, the Golden Record contains an hour-long recording of Andruan's brainwaves, compressed into about a minute of audio. This recording was made using an electroencephalogram, or EEG, a device that measures electrical activity in the brain. The electrical signals were encoded as sound and included on the record. The idea was unusual, even by the standards of a project as unconventional as the Golden Record. Brain activity produces electrical signals that can be measured by electrodes placed on the scalp. These signals reflect the activity of millions of neurons firing in complex patterns. The signals are too weak to be perceived directly, but they can be amplified and recorded. By converting those electrical signals into audio waveforms, they can be stored on a record. The question is, what use would this be to an extraterrestrial civilization? Brain activity is incredibly complex, and even human neuroscientists are still working to understand how brain signals relate to thoughts, emotions, and consciousness. It seems unlikely that an alien civilization, no matter how advanced, could decode Andruan's brainwaves and understand what she was thinking. But the team included it anyway, partly as an experiment and partly as a deeply personal gesture. Andrew Yang was instructed to think about specific topics during the recording session. She was asked to meditate on the history of the Earth, from its formation billions of years ago through the evolution of life and the emergence of human civilization. She was asked to think about the problems facing humanity, including war, poverty, and environmental degradation. And she was asked to think about falling in love. This last part is particularly significant because Anne and Carl Sagan had recently fallen in love. Their romance had begun during the creation of the Golden Record, and it would eventually lead to marriage. During the brainwave recording session, Anne thought about Carl, about the feelings she had for him, and about what it meant to love someone so deeply that you could not imagine life without them. In a very real sense, then, the Golden Record contains a love letter, encoded in the electrical activity of a human brain. It is invisible, inaudible, and likely incomprehensible to anyone who might find it. But it is there, woven into the audio content of the record, a private message hidden in plain sight. Years later, Andrew Yang wrote about this experience in the epilogue to Carl Sagan's book Billions and Billions. She described thinking about Earth's history, about the development of civilization, about the hope that humanity might survive its current challenges and reach a better future. And she described thinking about Carl, about the joy and wonder of falling in love, about the hope that they would spend their lives together. The brainwave recording is, in many ways, the most human thing on the entire record. It is not a polished performance or a carefully composed image. It is the raw electrical activity of a human brain engaged in thought and feeling. It is messy, complex, and deeply personal. And it represents something that cannot be easily put into words or images, the internal subjective experience of being human, of thinking and feeling and hoping and loving. Whether an extraterrestrial civilization could decode it is almost beside the point. The brainwave recording is there for us as much as it is for any hypothetical alien finder. It reminds us that behind all the carefully selected music and images, behind all the scientific diagrams and mathematical formulas, there are human beings with emotions, relationships, and inner lives. The Golden Record is not just a collection of data. It is an act of expression by specific individuals who poured their hearts into this project. Anne and Carl's love story became part of the record's mythology. They were married in 1981, for years after the launch of the Voyagers, and they remained together until Carl's death in 1996. Their partnership was both personal and professional, and they collaborated on many projects, including the television series Cosmos. The fact that their love began during the creation of the Golden Record, and that a record of Anne's thoughts and feelings during that time is traveling through space, adds a layer of poignancy to the whole project. Now let's consider the journey of the Voyager spacecraft and what the future holds for them and the Golden Records they carry. Both Voyager spacecraft have exceeded all expectations. They were designed to last 5 years, long enough to complete their primary missions of studying Jupiter and Saturn. But they have continued operating for more than 47 years, far longer than anyone anticipated. They have sent back data from Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, revolutionizing our understanding of the outer solar system. And they have continued into interstellar space, sending back information about the environment beyond the Sun's influence. Voyager 1 is currently the most distant human-made object from Earth. As of 2025, it is more than 15 billion miles away, traveling at about 38,000 miles per hour relative to the Sun. At that distance, radio signals from the spacecraft take more than 22 hours to reach Earth, and another 22 hours for commands from Earth to reach the spacecraft. Despite the distance, Voyager 1 is still in communication with Earth, though its transmitter power is incredibly weak. NASA uses the Deep Space Network, a collection of large radio antennas around the world, to communicate with the Voyagers. Voyager 2 is slightly closer, about 12.5 billion miles from Earth as of 2025, traveling at about 34,000 miles per hour. It took a different trajectory than Voyager 1, allowing it to visit Uranus and Neptune, planets that Voyager 1 did not encounter. Voyager 2 is also still transmitting data back to Earth. Both spacecraft have passed through the heliopause, the boundary where the solar wind from the Sun gives way to the interstellar medium. This is the region where the Sun's influence begins to fade and the environment is dominated by material from other stars. Voyager 1 crossed the heliopause in August 2012, and Voyager 2 followed in November 2018. They are now officially in interstellar space, though they are still within the gravitational influence of the Sun and will remain so for thousands of years. The spacecraft are powered by radioisotope thermoelectric generators, which convert heat from the radioactive decay of plutonium-238 into electricity. The plutonium decays at a known rate, and the power output decreases over time. Engineers have been carefully managing the power budget, turning off instruments and heaters to conserve energy. But eventually, there will not be enough power to run any instruments. Current estimates suggest that the last instruments will shut down sometime between 2025 and 2030, though the exact timeline depends on how efficiently the remaining power can be used. After the instruments shut down, the spacecraft will continue transmitting a carrier signal for a few more years, allowing NASA to track their positions. But eventually, even that will cease. The spacecraft will fall silent, becoming inert objects drifting through space. They will no longer be able to communicate with Earth or send back any data. They will simply coast onward, propelled by the momentum they gained decades ago. But the journey will not end. The spacecraft will continue moving through space for billions of years. In about 40,000 years, Voyager 1 will pass within 1.6 light-years of the star Gliese for 45. That is still an enormous distance, about 10 trillion miles, but it is the closest Voyager 1 will come to another star for a very long time. Voyager 2 will pass within a similar distance of the star Ross 248 in roughly the same timeframe. After that, the spacecraft will continue wandering through the galaxy, occasionally passing within a few light-years of other stars but never coming particularly close to any of them. The chances of either spacecraft ever colliding with anything are essentially zero. Space is so empty that even in the crowded environment of the galaxy, objects almost never hit each other unless they are gravitationally bound. The golden records will endure throughout this journey. They will not degrade in the vacuum of space. There is no air or water to cause corrosion. There are no living organisms to cause decay. The records will remain essentially unchanged, frozen in time, carrying their message forward into an unimaginably distant future. What will the galaxy be like when the records are finally found, if they are ever found? If it takes 1,000,000 years, the night sky as seen from Earth will be noticeably different. The stars will have moved in their orbits around the galaxy. Some will have died. Others will have been born. If it takes 1,000,000,000 years, the sun will be noticeably brighter and hotter, making Earth less hospitable to life as we know it. If it takes 5,000,000,000 years, the sun will have swelled into a red giant, consuming Mercury and Venus and possibly Earth. The continents will have shifted. The oceans may have boiled away. Humanity, if it still exists, may have long since left Earth to find new homes among the stars. And if it takes 10 billion years or more, the universe itself will be different. Stars will have used up much of the available hydrogen gas, and the rate of star formation will have slowed. Galaxies will have merged and rearranged. The Milky Way and the Andromeda Galaxy will have collided and combined into a single large galaxy. The universe will be colder, darker, and more spread out than it is now. Through all of this, the golden records will continue their journey, carrying a message from a planet that may no longer exist, from a species that may be long extinct, to anyone who might someday find them. It is a humbling and awe-inspiring thought. The records will outlast everything we have built. They will outlast our cities, our monuments, our books, and our digital archives. They may well outlast our species and our world. This perspective forces us to think about time in a way that is difficult and uncomfortable. We are used to thinking in terms of human lifespans, perhaps extending to a few generations into the past or future. But the Golden Record asks us to think in terms of geological and cosmic time, spans so vast that human history becomes a brief flicker, a moment barely worth noting. And yet, the record was made by humans, in a specific moment, with all the limitations and flaws that implies. It reflects who we were in 1977, what we knew, what we valued, and what we hoped for. It is a document of its time, as specific and contingent as any historical artifact. The juxtaposition of the cosmic timescale and the human scale details of the record's creation is part of what makes it so fascinating and so moving. Now let's reflect on the legacy and meaning of the Golden Record for humanity, what it says about us and what it has taught us in the decades since its creation. The Golden Record has taken on a significance that goes far beyond its original purpose. Very few people seriously believe it will ever be found by an extraterrestrial civilization. Carl Sagan himself acknowledged that the record was, in essence, a message we sent to ourselves. It is a statement about who we are and what we value, a reflection of our hopes and dreams, and a reminder of our place in the cosmos. The record has been referenced in countless books, films, television shows, and songs. It has become a symbol of human curiosity and optimism, of our desire to reach out and connect with something larger than ourselves. People who have never heard the contents of the record, who may not even know exactly what is on it, still recognize it as an important cultural artifact. It represents the idea that we are not alone, or at least that we hope we are not alone, and that we are willing to take the chance of reaching out even if we never receive a response. The process of creating the record forced the team to ask fundamental questions about humanity. What defines us? What do we want to say about ourselves? What do we want to preserve? These are questions that are worth asking even if no one is listening. They help us reflect on our values, our achievements, and our responsibilities. The record presents a vision of humanity that is diverse, creative, and hopeful. It shows us at our best, or at least it tries to. It acknowledges that we come from different cultures and speak different languages, but it also asserts that we are all part of the same species, sharing the same planet. It shows our capacity for art, science, and technology. It shows our connection to the natural world and our ability to wonder at the universe. But the record also reveals our limitations and biases. It reflects the perspectives of a small group of people working in a specific cultural and historical context. It is incomplete, imperfect, and in some ways outdated. The world has changed significantly since 1977. Technologies that were cutting edge then are now obsolete. Cultural attitudes have shifted. Our understanding of the universe has deepened. Some people have criticized the record for what it does not include. There are no major African musical traditions represented beyond a few brief selections. There is no Aboriginal Australian music beyond 1 minute. There is no explicitly feminist or queer content, reflecting the social attitudes of the 1970s. There is no acknowledgement of the ongoing struggles for justice and equality that have defined much of human history. The record presents a harmonious vision of humanity that glosses over the conflicts, inequalities, and injustices that are very real parts of our world. These criticisms are valid, and they highlight an important truth. No message, no matter how carefully constructed, can fully capture the complexity and diversity of human existence. Any attempt to represent all of humanity will inevitably fail in some ways, because humanity is too vast, too varied, and too contradictory to be summed up in any single artifact. The Golden Record is not a definitive statement about who we are. It is one statement, made at one moment in time, by one group of people. It is valuable not because it is perfect, but because it represents an earnest attempt to answer an impossible question. The record has also sparked discussions about the ethics of sending messages into space. Some scientists and philosophers have argued that broadcasting our presence to the universe might be dangerous. If there are hostile extraterrestrial civilizations out there, attracting their attention could be a catastrophic mistake. The Golden Record, along with other messages sent into space, such as the Arecibo message and active SETI transmissions, has been criticized by some as reckless. Others have countered that the risks are minimal. Any civilization capable of receiving our messages and traveling to Earth would be so technologically advanced that they could probably detect our presence anyway, through our radio and television broadcasts that have been leaking into space for decades. The Golden Record is such a small, passive object that it is unlikely to make any difference to whether we are discovered or not. These debates continue, and they touch on deep questions about risk, communication, and our place in the cosmos. Should we actively try to contact extraterrestrial intelligence, or should we remain quiet and listen? What are the potential benefits and dangers of making ourselves known? How do we balance the desire to explore and connect with the need for caution and safety? These are questions that the Golden Record has helped bring to public attention, even if it does not answer them. The record has also influenced how we think about time capsules and messages to the future. Numerous projects since the Voyagers have attempted to create similar artifacts, messages intended to communicate across vast spans of time. The Long Now Foundation, for example, is building a clock designed to run for 10,000 years, meant to encourage long-term thinking and remind us that the future is real and will be inhabited by people who will judge our actions. Various time capsules have been buried or sealed in monuments, intended to be opened by future generations who can look back and see what we cared about and how we lived. The Golden Record set a high bar for these projects. It combined ambition, creativity, and technical sophistication in a way that few subsequent projects have matched. It also demonstrated the value of involving experts from multiple fields, bringing together scientists, artists, musicians, and writers to create something that was greater than the sum of its parts. Perhaps most importantly, the Golden Record reminds us of the power of optimism and imagination. It was created during the Cold War, at a time when the threat of nuclear annihilation was very real. The world was divided by ideological conflicts, and the future was uncertain. And yet, a group of people came together and created a message of hope and connection, a statement that we are worth knowing and that we want to be known. They believed that humanity had a future, that we would survive our time and reach for the stars. They believed that we had something valuable to offer to the universe. That belief may seem naive or unrealistic, especially in moments when the world feels dark and the future seems bleak. But it is also necessary. Without hope, without the belief that we can do better and be better, there is no reason to try. The Golden Record is an act of hope, a gesture toward a future that we cannot see or predict but that we choose to believe in anyway. The record is also a reminder of how small we are. The Voyager spacecraft, with their precious cargo, are tiny specks in the vastness of space. The entire Earth is a pale blue dot, barely visible from the outer reaches of the solar system. All of human history, all our achievements and failures, all our loves and losses, have taken place on this one small planet orbiting an average star in an ordinary galaxy. We are not the center of the universe. We are not even the center of our own galaxy. We are a small part of something unimaginably larger. And yet, we are here. We exist. We think, we feel, we create, we wonder. We make music and art. We ask questions about the universe and our place in it. We reach out, hoping to connect with something beyond ourselves. That is worth something. That is worth celebrating. The Golden Record is a celebration of human existence, an affirmation that we are here and that our presence matters, even if only to ourselves. It is a gift to the future, whether that future is inhabited by our descendants, by some other species that evolves on Earth after we are gone, or by extraterrestrial beings who find the spacecraft drifting through their region of space billions of years from now. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you can imagine the Voyager spacecraft out there in the darkness, still traveling, still carrying their golden cargo forward. Imagine the record spinning silently, its grooves holding sounds and images from a distant world. Imagine it passing through clouds of interstellar dust, through regions lit by the glow of nearby stars, through the empty voids between galaxies. Imagine it enduring, long after we are gone, a testament to the fact that we were here, that we lived, and that we tried to say hello. The Golden Record is a message of peace, of hope, and of connection. It says that we are part of the universe, not separate from it. It says that we are curious, creative, and hopeful. It says that we want to understand and be understood. And it says that we believe the universe is a place where connection is possible, where different forms of life and intelligence might someday meet and recognize each other. Whether that belief is justified, we cannot say. But the act of believing, of creating the record and sending it out into the darkness, is itself meaningful. It changes nothing about the physical universe, but it changes something about us. It reminds us of what we can be when we try, when we work together, when we look beyond our immediate concerns and think about the larger picture. The Golden Record is a small thing in a vast universe, but it is our small thing. It represents our moment, our attempt, our message. And it will endure, carrying that message forward through time and space, a silent ambassador from a distant world, waiting patiently for someone, somewhere, sometime, to find it and know that they are not alone. Sleep well, knowing that out there in the darkness, a piece of humanity is traveling through space, carrying our sounds, our images, our greetings, and our hopes. The record plays on in silence, a message that says simply, "We were here, we tried to reach out, and we hoped you would hear us." If you found this journey through the story of the Golden Record meaningful or interesting, consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, or leaving a comment sharing your thoughts. It helps others discover these stories and reminds us all that we are part of something larger than ourselves, connected to each other and to the cosmos in ways we are only beginning to understand. Until next time, rest well and dream of the stars.